Hello, guys. It's me, Misogynist EU here. Today, I want to talk about Mercy again, but this time in a different light. So, previously, the last time I spoke of Mercy, it was something about Mercy players being professional victims, and then before that, it was if you ban Mercy, you're a misogynist. Those videos were absolutely hilarious, and I loved making them, and it made some people very mad. One person in particular that many of you may know. Anyway, I want to talk about the actual catatonic destruction of this character over the years. Go and watch like really, really old Mercy montages from like 2018, 2019, even maybe before that to some degree, and actually go and watch the character, right? Actually look what Mercy was. Because back then, Mercy didn't really have that stigma around them until she became fucking ludicrously broken with the several metas that favored her. But generally speaking, Mercy was a relatively skill-based character, a high skill-based character. And it was because of a lot of factors, mainly being her movement. Her movement was really, really, really complex. It was really difficult to perform, and not only was it really difficult to perform, it was kind of janky too. So it made it that even if you were performing it, there was a chance that if you don't do it absolutely perfectly, like if there was some form of human error involved, then you would more potentially make a mistake. So it made it very difficult. Mercy was not a super accessible hero in terms of her skill ceiling, and that was a really, really fun part about Mercy. If you were relatively new to playing the character, then you could play the lower level style of Mercy that was relatively easy. You can just pocket someone all game and you just kind of chill out. You don't have to move that much. Whereas the really, really, really high level Mercy players actually understood what the character was really good at, and it was being some pseudo triage support, but also a pocket. So to play Mercy effectively a long time ago, it took really, really high mechanical skill of the movement because it was very difficult. And it also required really high level game sense to understand where you should be, when you should be there, who you should be boosting, who you should be healing and when, what angles are more important than other angles, so you can manipulate what duels are more likely to be won or lost based on your attention in them, so then you can secure different angles on purpose because maybe one angle is more or is just stronger in general in a certain situation. You as a Mercy could influence that by boosting your DPS that was trying to take that angle and so on. There was a lot that went into playing the character. This was obviously prior to DPS passive and so on, so her healing output was obviously stronger, and there was just a lot that went into the character that made the character very, very hard to play, and generally very respectable back then. However, over the course of a few years, not Genji, I read the Genji Playground in the thing, Mercy kind of lost a lot of that, because what they did is they slowly made the hero more accessible to a larger audience. They made the movement easier, they made kind of everything about the hero easier, to the point where the actual skill gap between a really high level Mercy player and a really bad Mercy player was generally just the game sense of understanding who, what, when, where, why to do certain things, and the movement. There was really nothing else in the character other than that was a skill-based thing, like the ult didn't really have any nuance, the damage boost and heal was very simplified over time, and then Overwatch 2, the movement got simplified over time, so even that skill gap started to diminish, and then it became the only actual relevant skill Mercy players could display was your game sense, understanding where you should be and when. And then as the game evolved, it became more simplified because it was just be on your Sojourn, just be on your burst damage DPS, just be on your Ashe, just be on your hip scan, right? It became way simpler. So over time, we went from a character that was mechanically challenging, they had a lot of nuance to them, they had a lot of their kit that was very complicated and difficult to understand, they had a lot of influence over the game and had to be respected, there was a high game sense and map knowledge requirement. The hero was genuinely difficult to play, and over time they evolved into a hero that was brain dead, just pick Mercy and damage boost your DPS, and you don't really need to know how to move very well anymore because, well, the movement got so simplified over time that it wasn't exactly super relevant anyway. And that was the absolute destruction of hero. And then you add things like DPS passive, which fucked over Mercy a lot more than the other heroes. And then you add things like Season 9 that made her hitbox bigger, and then nerfed her HP to 225, and then all the reworks she had, and it's just complete destruction of the hero. And the reason the hero became so terrible is because Blizzard made the character more accessible. Genuinely, my opinion is that due to the hero's popularity, Mercy's massive, they deliberately simplified the hero and made her more accessible on purpose so that more people that would be potentially Mercy players became more Mercy players and would buy more skins because it was more accessible. You know, you didn't have to be such a good Mercy player to use your cool skin and play the hero effectively because they made them so easy. So when you make a hero much easier, you make it so that their skill curve is obviously diminished. It becomes more flattened. It's less of a curve. It's more attainable to get those skills, which means the more high-level skills become more average, and because of that, it means that the hero appears to be stronger than they are because it's much easier to get to the peak of the hero because she's easier to play. And because of that, you have to nerf the hero so that their overall peak is lower because it's too easy to reach that peak. They deliberately made the hero much easier over time, and by doing so forced themselves into a situation where they had to nerf the character into the ground because they were too accessible and too easy to play for how strong they were. And that fucked the hero. The problem was that Blizzard catered to all the new Mercy players because Mercy players make them a fuckload of money. And because they wanted all the money, they made the hero more accessible and more easy, so more people were going to play Mercy in order to try and print more money with the skins and so on. There's likely a lot of other factors that went into it as well. Probably just generally making the game easier. A lot of the characters are getting easier. Ever since the release of Overwatch 2, generally heroes have been getting a lot easier, and even since Overwatch 1 to a degree. But introduction to things like Season 9, for example, was a big part of this. And Season 9 did a lot of the same thing to a lot of other heroes, right? The same way that Mercy had to be nerfed due to accessibility reasons, the character was so easy to play that it forced Blizzard into nerfing the hero because too many people were hitting the peak of the hero too often. It was the same reason that a lot of other DPS heroes and tank heroes and so on were nerfed as well, because they made it way too easy to reach the peak of the hero. For example, Zarya in Season 1 was absolutely brain damagedly broken, stupendously broken. And rightfully so, she should have been nerfed. But the main reason wasn't the fact that Zarya was strong. That's not really the reason that they nerfed her. It was primarily because Zarya was so easy to play that you could be really terrible and get a shitload of value on her just because she was so simple. If you understood the 3-bubble cycle, then you could just do whatever the fuck you wanted because you were an invincible superhuman. You could just walk down people and it didn't matter how good or bad you were at the game because you just kind of deleted whoever you fought anyway. And the same thing has happened to a lot of other characters over time. I mean, like for example, hit scans as well. Hit scans have had their range absolutely crippled because they progressively made the characters easier and easier. Take McCree, for example. McCree used to be this really high skill hero that only kind of had the flashbang as anti-dive, but they were a big hitbox. They were easy to poke out, but you were rewarded massively for your aim. You could shoot super fast. You had super long range. And you did a shitload of damage and so on. But over time, as they made the hero more accessible, they realized, yeah, we can't do that, we can't do this, we can't do this. And they had to make the character easier, or not necessarily easier, but a lot weaker over time to compensate for the fact that the hero was getting easier over time. Which has gotten us to the point now where everyone thinks McCree is kind of a brain-dead hero. It doesn't really require a lot of anything. You're given so much free value on the character that, of course, the character's going to get nerfed into the ground and feel like terrible, and feel like shit to play, essentially. And the same thing happened to Mercy. However, I think it happened to Mercy on a degree that's inconceivable to most other heroes. Right? I'm the Genji crybaby, the certified guy that says Genji's terrible, which is true. But you can disagree. And I get it, right? I'm like the fucking crybaby. I'm the guy that says Genji's terrible. That's kind of like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's who I am. But I will say, and I would say, I think everyone probably has to agree with this. I don't think there's a single hero currently, or even in the history of Overwatch, that has been as mutilated or systematically destroyed over time. You went from having a hero that was very good at certain things and was very difficult to play and had a very loyal player base that loved playing that character, and it gave heroes or people that kind of outlet. And it was really good because the hero was very accessible to begin with. You could play the hero, so if you were very bad at the game, you can play the hero if it's your favorite hero. But it was also that you could grow as a player over time, and you would get rewarded for doing so because she was a lot stronger back then because she was harder to play. So you, as a Mercy player, you had something to work towards. But today, you don't really have anything to work towards. The difference in a really, really good Mercy player and a really, really bad Mercy player is comically low. There's really not a massive difference between really good Mercies and really bad Mercies. Because it's just so difficult to actually express your skill in the hero because they've been so destroyed. There is no character in the history of the game that's been as fucked over as Mercy. They removed quite literally every single part of her kit that made her interesting to play as and against. They removed all of the incentive for her to move around and express the only skillful part of her kit, which is the movement. They got rid of it by adding a bunch of burst damage heroes to the game, which doesn't necessarily the fault of Mercy players or Blizzard's not understanding of Mercy. They were going to add those heroes anyway, but it's the overall hero design that Mercy's really good at pocketing and enabling was that hero design, unfortunately. So it got to the point where the best move on Mercy was to just stand still and pocket your burst damage character because there's nothing else. You're also disincentivized to move around a lot and heal a lot of different people because of the DPS passive and so on, which made it so that if you were jumping around between people and healing them as you needed to, triage support style like you could back in the day, it meant that obviously you would never actually heal anyone up. It would take way too long to do it. Therefore, you were better off just hoping your other support did it and pocketing one guy because, well, what's the point of bumping your heals around everywhere? You could just do that on an actual effective support. The actual value that Mercy gets is the damage boost, and so you have to be utilizing that as much as possible to get the value out of it, which means you have to be pocketing to get the value out of it. Mercy's the only support hero in the game where legitimately their only playstyle is the most brain-dead one. It's the most silly, unfun playstyle where it's the hyper-pocket support style, where the best way to play her is to just kind of pocket your DPS. And that can be difficult in a lot of cases. For example, pocketing certain DPS is very hard. Pocketing a Genji is very hard. It's dangerous. It requires a lot of movement skill. It requires a lot of understanding of how to like actually play on angles to make sure that you don't die, how to make people push you as a Mercy, how to body block shots for the person you're pocketing. And there is a lot that goes into pocketing some heroes. And Mercy isn't this like brain dead hero where everyone can play her. Mercy's still got a relatively decent skill ceiling. You know, she's not exactly the hardest hero to play in the world, but not exactly super easy either. She's just the easiest out of all of them. And that's because Blizzard is so bad at balancing the character and designing the hero. But there is a lot of stuff that goes into playing Mercy that is difficult. It's just that a few years ago, it was significantly bigger because they turned a mountain into a molehill in terms of her skill curve, which is unfortunate. And that's why I think Mercy has been the most fucked over character in the history of the game. I don't think there's been another hero who has been so unbelievably destroyed, has had so much taken away from them over time. And I think Mercy's relatively easy to fix, right? You put her GA cooldown back on 1 second or 1.5 and make it so the GA cooldown begins as soon as you press the button to incentivize her to move around more. You get rid of the DPS passive. That should just be gone in the game anyway. That shouldn't be in the game regardless. You reduce the hitboxes again, so you make her harder to shoot. And you just incentivize her to move around a lot more instead of like permanently pocketing someone. And that could even be through a resource meter. For example, the longer you go without healing someone, the higher percentage of, I don't know, damage boost points you receive when you heal them, right? And then you can expend, though, like that damage boost meter on a character, and maybe it only ticks down when they're dealing damage, maybe it ticks down more when they deal damage, or maybe it ticks down less when they deal damage, or whatever it may be. There is a way to make it so Mercy can be incentivized to move around the map and be a triage support again, and be a very high skill ceiling character again, but it won't happen when damage boost is an infinite resource that can just be simply abused on burst damage characters like it is now. And that's my opinion. I love you all. I'm going to go watch the Lane Hemingway video. I actually didn't do that on purpose. I didn't call him lame on purpose. I swear I actually remembered his name. Anyway, I'm going to watch it. People were saying it was funny or that he called me out. absolutely fair enough. That like I fully support and respect people's abilities to do that, and yeah, I don't really care. Have a good day. I hope you all have a good day. I love you all. Tell someone that they are very handsome today, or very beautiful. You can do that too, and enjoy a good meal. Talk to your family, and praise the Lord. Goodbye, guys. Have a good day. Bye bye. Goodbye. 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 Goodbye.